We sit there for a little bit and Svi catches up. He was like, we're almost done. I was like, no, we are not almost done. Like, not even close. And he immediately says, I'm out. I'm done. I'm going to go back. My ego just like rose to the surface and wanted to scream like, no, we have to continue. We've gone so far already and I got to get that picture for Instagram, right? Like so stupid. My instinct was to say like, let's keep going because I hate giving up on things. But I was like, you know what? You're right. This is the right decision. You're listening to the Bold Women in Business podcast, the show for women who are building something that actually matters and who are ready to stop hiding behind the polished and perfect and start showing up as their bold, magnetic, human AF selves. I'm Rachel Honeyman, your guide to finding your true magic and putting it front and center in your brand. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello, beautiful human. Welcome back to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman. I'm the founder of Honey Be Bold, and I'm your guide on this journey. If you are watching on video, dun, 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 this is very exciting. We have introduced video to the mix. If you are not watching on video and you're just listening, you're going to have to take my word for it that this space is super cute. Okay. I found this little corner in my office and I turned it into a studio, and I've got like my pink chair and my Honey Be Bold sign, and I've got a pink boa and sparkly lights and a plant. And like, I went all out having fun designing this space. So you'll have to take my word for it or just go take a look and trust me, it's worth it. If you've been with me for the last 60 plus episodes, which is wild, you know that this podcast is usually focused on the tactics, right? It's all about marketing and business and messaging. And we do get into the real stuff too a lot. But one of the things that I wanted to bring back into the podcast that I feel like got missed a little bit as we got more tactical is kind of just this vibe of bringing you into my cozy little space, two friends having a coffee chat and talking about business and life and all the other parts of it. So that's what I'm bringing it back into this season. We will still talk about tactics, don't worry, but there's just going to be a little bit more of the personal stories and all of that. So with that, I want to share a story with you today. And this is one of the craziest travel stories I have, and I've got a lot. Our friends like to joke that when Svi and I go on vacation, if we don't have a near-death experience, it is not a Svi and Rachel vacation. So this is one of the craziest stories, and I think about it a lot because there's so many lessons to take from it, and I think you can learn a lot from it. So let's dive in. Quick pause. I want to tell you about a tool I use in my business every single day that I could not live without, NeedleCal. It's a calendar booking tool that lets anyone who wants to book a call with me, whether that's a potential client, an existing client, or anyone in between, to just click a link, pick a time, and boom, we're done. None of that back and forth email nonsense we all hate. I switched to NeedleCal from Calendly because, frankly, the pricing was getting ridiculous. And NeedleCal is not even in the same ballpark as any of their competitors. But they're not cutting corners. They offer the same features as everyone else, but they intentionally keep their prices low because they believe in making their products accessible to small business owners like you and me. And as someone who talks a lot about building a sustainable business, that mission means a lot to me. With NeedleCal, you can customize everything. You can brand your calendars, the settings are super flexible, and you can have as many calendars as you like. And I should know because I've got about 1 million of them. If you are paying through the nose for Calendly or another calendar booking tool, seriously go check out NeedleCal. The link is in the show notes and you can thank me later. Okay, let's get back to the episode. So picture this. I am leaning my weight against a rock, like on the side of a mountain, and my feet are pressing into this metal rung beneath me. And I am just praying to whatever gods of geometry there are out there that I am not going to go tumbling down the side of a mountain. My gloves are soaking wet, so I take them off and my fingers have like no feeling in them. And so I took off my gloves so that I could press them against my neck, my stomach, whatever skin I could access to just get some feeling back in them. So how did I get here? we're in Norway. And the night before this meet on the side of the mountain, my husband Svi asked me, "So what are we doing tomorrow?" And I just casually told him, "Oh, I signed us up for this hike," except it wasn't just a hike. There was a lot more involved, but it was a 28-kilometer round trip. I'll call it a hike for now, but I'll tell you what else was involved. Up to Trolltunga, which is this like Instagram worthy hiking spot. People love it because when you get to the top, it looks like a troll's tongue. That's why it's called Trolltunga. So it's super cool. You get these really cool pictures. And I saw this when I was planning our trip and I was like, we got to do this. So I signed us up, not even realizing how long this trek was. But I was like, whatever, we can do it. We're pretty avid hikers generally. But we had never done anything this long before. And Svi, who is a natural skeptic, and definitely the more cautious one in the relationship, was like, "Are you sure this is a good idea? Like, what did you sign us up for?" And I, being kind of naturally very adventurous and like jump feet first into pretty much everything, and I live my life as though I'm invincible until I'm not. That's like a problem to discuss for another time, maybe. Um, I was like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. So 28 kilometers for my Americans in the crowd, fellow Americans in the crowd, that's 17 miles. So it's a long trek. And I think our max before this was like 12 miles of hiking. Now, like I said, this was not just hiking. So I thought that it was going to be easier than just a, 28-kilometer round trip hike because it was broken up. The first 14 kilometers is broken up with some mountain biking, some hiking, some rock scramble, and some via ferrata. I had never heard of via ferrata before I signed us up for this, but I was like, whatever, it'll be fine. So via ferrata is basically these thin metal rungs that are bolted into the side of the mountain. And they're kind of arranged like a ladder that you climb. And all along the ladder is this cable that runs along the side that you're hooked into with two carabiners because you're literally climbing the side of a mountain. So you need to be hooked onto something or like you're going to free fall. So we're wearing helmets and all of that, but you're hooked in to this cable and you climb. So back up. We get on the road at 5:35 a.m. because we were pretty far from the base camp where we were going to be getting our gear and meeting up with our guide and all of that. And we get to the base camp, we're getting our helmets and our backpacks with all of our gear in them. We had, special boots and special rain gear because it was freezing raining the entire time, like the whole time. It's May in Norway. It's basically still winter. So it's just freezing raining, terrible weather. And they gave us these like thin gloves to wear, which were rendered useless in about 5 minutes because they were not waterproof. So they got soaked through like really quickly. And we join our group, join our guide, and we start with the mountain biking portion of this. So it was 6 kilometers of mountain biking uphill pretty much the whole way. And we're literally on the side of a mountain. And like beneath us is the fjord. We're like on a fjord and like there's just water below us and we're really high up. And I just tried to like not look to the right because the right was where the water was. And I am not a cyclist. Like I have done very little mountain biking in my life and I've like barely ridden a bicycle since I was a kid. So I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like huffing and puffing and like felt like I was dying for this 6-kilometer stretch. And the whole time I'm like, oh my God, like what is wrong with me? I'm so fit. Like I do martial arts and I hike and I'm super active and like I feel like I'm dying and this bicycle is going to take me out. But I made it through. I got through the 6 kilometers. And then the next parts were we had the hiking portion, which was super easy for me because I do a lot of hiking, and the rock scramble portion, which again was like pretty easy, and then the via ferrata. Somewhere along the way, it started feeling like the Hunger Games because people in our group were dropping like flies. So, about probably halfway through the mountain biking portion, one woman just said, like, I'm out. I'm done. I'm not doing this. And she turned back and went back to base camp. Then, about halfway through the hiking portion, I don't remember if it was through the hiking portion or the rock scramble. It doesn't even matter. It was a little bit of a blur. These two women in the group, it was a mother and a daughter, and they come forward and there were a lot of tears. And they said, like, we don't think this is a good idea. This is feeling really dangerous. We're going to turn back. So they go back. So we went from having 7 people in the group plus the guide to now we have just 4. It's just me and Svi and these 2 other women who are from Amsterdam, and they were mountain climbers. Like that was their sport of choice. They were climbers. And so they had a harder time on the mountain. Actually, they did not have a hard time in the mountain biking because they're from Amsterdam and they like live on a bicycle. But the hiking portion, they had a little bit of a hard time with. But then we get to the Via Ferrata and they're like, like mountain gazelles, just like flying up the mountain. And so we get to the Via Ferrata part, and my initial thought was, oh, this is going to be so easy. Like, it's like climbing a ladder. How hard could it be? Well, it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Within, I don't know, a short amount of time, I started really struggling. So, as I mentioned, there's this line of cable alongside the rungs of the Via Ferrata, but every few rungs, you have to unclip one carabiner, clip it to the next line of cable, because it's kind of like short lines of cable, and then unclip the second carabiner and clip it into the next rung of cable. You always have to be connected with one carabiner at least to the cable, because again, on the side of a mountain, could go flying off and chaos will ensue. So as we're climbing, it started getting harder and harder for me to maneuver the carabiners. So if you've never used a carabiner before, basically you have to like unscrew this metal piece and then press it in to open it. And then when you connect it to the next part, you just release, and then you have to screw that metal piece back in to lock it in place. And if you have it unlocked, it's not secure. So this is a lot of dexterity that this requires. And my fingers are frozen. Like, I have no feeling in my fingers. So I started really struggling to maneuver the carabiners. And my legs are shaking. I'm frozen. I'm like, I can't stop looking down. And I am not a person who struggles with a fear of heights at all. Like, I'm happy to be high up. I don't care. I could live on a mountain. But I just couldn't stop thinking like, oh, I'm literally on the side of a mountain. And like, yeah, I'm wearing a helmet. But like, if I actually fall, like, that's not going to save me. I'm in big trouble here. So I kind of had this mantra going in my head. I just kept saying, I can do this. I got this. I can do hard things. And that's a mantra that I say to myself a lot because life is hard and it's sometimes important. But I just kept saying this. I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And it was like the only way that I kept going. I kept going. And so up ahead of me was the guide and these 2 other women. They were pretty far ahead because, like I said, they're flying up the mountain. And at a certain point, I realized that Svi was like falling pretty far behind me. So I waited for him, and waiting for him was itself not the easiest thing because I had to kind of like hook my other arm through one of the rungs on the Via Ferrata because I could not rely on my hands to actually hold me there. And so I kind of had to like glue myself to the side of the mountain and wait for him to get there. And then when he caught up to me, I was like, are you okay? Like, everything okay? And he said, I don't think so. Like, my muscles are in full on spasm from the cold. Like, he's a really strong guy. He trains a lot. This was not a strength issue. It was literally the cold was just making his muscles completely spasm. And I was just like, it's going to be okay. Let's keep going. We're going to be okay. So I keep going and keep like stopping to wait for Tzvi, and this continues for a while. And then I see the guide and these two women sitting up ahead on kind of a ledge on the mountain. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. We're almost done. We're almost to the top. This is great. So I catch up to them and I say that to the guide. And he looks at me and he was like, I'm so sorry, but we are not even close. Like, we've got a long way to go. We're only about a quarter of the way up the Via Ferrata. And then once we get up to the top, we will have 2 more kilometers to hike in the snow. Oh, did I forgot to mention, at a certain point, that freezing rain turned to snow. And we're in basically a full-on blizzard now. And it's just like the worst weather. The visibility was terrible. Like, it was bad. It was bad. So if we get to the top of the Via Ferrata, like, then we have to hike 2 more kilometers in the snow. We can like go and take our pictures at the top of Trolltunga, but then there's nowhere to take shelter. There's nowhere to dry off. Like, there's nothing. And then we have to hike back down the rest of the way, which is 14 kilometers in the snow. So I'm like, oh my God, like, how are we going to do this? We sit there for a little bit and Tzvi catches up and he had the same thought that I did. He was like, we're almost done. I was like, no, we are not almost done. Like, not even close. And I told him how much we had left. And he immediately says, I'm out. I'm done. I'm going to go back. And my ego just like rose to the surface and wanted to scream like, no, we have to continue. Like, I just had this internal dialogue going on where it was like, we paid for this. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We've gone so far already and we've put in so much work already. And like, I got to get that picture for Instagram, right? Like, so stupid. But I was just like, my instinct was to say like, let's keep going. Cause I hate giving up on things. Like, I really, really hate giving up on things. I hate putting effort into something and not having it succeed. This is like a really hard thing that I'm constantly working on as like a type A perfectionist, is that sometimes things just don't work out. And if you know my story, you know that like there's many layers to that. Sometimes things just don't work out. But I couldn't get past that like voice in my head initially. And thankfully, we had a guide with us who could make the call. So when Tzvi said, I'm going back, he said, let's sit for a minute. I have to think about this. Like, all of my training is for this exact scenario. I have to do some calculations. We are at severe risk of hypothermia right now because we will have nowhere to dry off. We will have nowhere to take shelter. And we've got a long way to go. And he said these were the worst conditions he had ever seen. And he'd been a guide for a long time. So he said, I think it's too dangerous. If you're going back, Tzvi, like, we all got to go back together. So I was a little crushed, to be honest, but I was like, you know what? You're right. This is the right decision. The other 2 women in the group looked a little pissed because, like I said, they're mountain climbers. Like, this is easy for them. This is like no big deal. So they looked pretty pissed, but they agreed and we all started going back down. Climbing down was actually scarier for me than going up in a lot of ways. Tzvi said it wasn't for him, but for me, I was just like, I couldn't stop looking down, and I was just, my brain and my body were not communicating at this point. So I just was like gluing myself to the side of the mountain. Like, I came away that evening, like when we got back to our Airbnb, my shins were completely like bloody and bruised because I had just glued myself to the side of the mountain to just like get down safely. It was pretty scary, but we got back down to the bottom. I fell a few times while we were hiking down, but I made it down. I just was like very bruised up. And then when we get down to the bottom, first of all, the sun miraculously came out. As soon as my feet hit the ground at the bottom, the sun came out. It became a beautiful, clear day, like you would not believe. And I am not necessarily the most like woo-woo person who believes in like signs, but it was kind of felt like, okay, we made the right decision, right? There's also a part of me that was like, well, maybe it would have cleared up there, but probably that wasn't the case. Very different weather at the top and bottom of a mountain. But we get down to the bottom, and now we have to mountain bike the rest of the way, the 6 kilometers back to base camp. And so I started cycling down, but we're still on this like very narrow path on the side of a cliff, like literally on the side of a cliff. And like I said, my brain and my body were just not communicating at this point. And so I kept like missing the pedals and making stupid decisions and like going over rocks that like I could have avoided if my brain were working properly. And I fell over twice and came so close to just like toppling off the side of the mountain that I was like, nope, I'm not doing that anymore. And I walked my bicycle back almost the whole way. It took me a really long time to get back and catch up to everyone, but I was just like, I'm not taking any risks. And then the last like quarter mile of the trail before getting to base camp was just this downhill slope. And so I was like, you know what? I can do this. And I got on the bike and I didn't even have to put my feet on the pedals. I just lifted my feet up and sailed down back to base camp. And it was like this beautiful, glorious moment of like, it was so easy and the sun is shining on my face and I had like shed some layers because it warmed up and it was the most beautiful thing. I'm literally just like coasting on the side of a fjord and it was the most beautiful view and it was incredible. And I get back to base camp and we get all our stuff together and we head back to our Airbnb. And I just remember feeling this intense disappointment. Truthfully, I was disappointed that we didn't finish, but much more than the disappointment was the pride I felt that we had, first of all, even taken this chance, like even tried something so hard, and that we were brave enough to walk away from it and to see when it was not safe anymore and to walk away from it. So why am I telling you this story to kick off season 4? Well, because I see women all the time in business and especially in their content marketing, but really in all parts of business, in this exact same scenario, just not on the side of a mountain, literally on the cliff. They are exhausted from putting all this effort into something that isn't working and they're getting nowhere. They're just putting all this effort in and getting nowhere. And what often happens is that people start something because they think it's the thing that they're supposed to do, right? So they start posting on LinkedIn or they start posting reels on Instagram or they start a podcast or they start a newsletter that they want to send out to their list. And they start it without a clear idea of what am I trying to accomplish here? What's my strategy? What's the goal? What's all of that? And they start it in a way that isn't actually aligned with like the kind of business that they want to build and who they want to be to their audience. And it doesn't actually respect who they are at their core. And so they start and stop and start and stop and start and stop, right? I know so many people who have started podcasts, recorded 3 episodes, and then they quit and that's it, right? Or they start an email newsletter and they send it out 5 times and then like they get overwhelmed or work gets busy with their client work or they just aren't seeing the results that they should have hoped and they stop, they quit, right? Or they post for a week on Instagram, 5 days a week on Instagram for a week or 2 or 3 or however long. And then when they don't see a lot of interaction with their posts, they don't see their account growing, they give up because it's too hard. And they say, what's the point? And then they feel guilty because they're not posting on social media or they're not marketing their business. And they kind of get into this like paralyzed state where they're feeling guilty and like they don't know what to do. And they just don't do anything for a while. And then maybe they start something up again a month or 2 or 3 later because they see something or they watch a workshop or whatever it might be, and or they feel motivated in some way and they start it up again, but with the same kind of approach of, I don't have a plan, I don't have a strategy, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm supposed to do it. So I'm going to do it. But then they can't actually keep it up because they don't have the plan to back it up. And so when they don't get immediate traction, they pivot and they're constantly moving, they're constantly trying new things, and they're constantly exhausted as a result, which of course they are. Of course they're exhausted. And what drives me crazy is that these are women who are smart and capable and driven and have deep values that drive them. They may not be super in touch with those values yet, but they know they exist. They know that there is something deep in there. And they're not afraid of hard work. Like, they are not afraid of doing the thing. That's why they start these things to begin with. They start putting in the effort because they are ready to do the work. But because it doesn't have a strategy behind it, and it doesn't have a clear plan behind it, and it's not designed for them, they can't keep it up. And then the message they tell themselves is, oh, I'm just bad at marketing, or I'm just not good at social media, or I just don't know how to do this. And that story is so wrong. It is so wrong. What's really happening is that you don't have clarity. You don't have clarity on who you are and who you're trying to talk to and how to talk about that magical, unique thing that only you offer. You don't know how to talk about it. And you don't know what your plan is, and you don't know what your strategy is. And so every time you sit down to create content or do marketing for your business or whatever it might be, you're making 1,000 tiny decisions every single time, instead of making several big decisions that guide everything you do. And so when you sit down, things should be easy. They can be easy. Trust me, they can. And so when you sit down to create content or do anything related to the marketing of your business, you have to make 1,000 tiny decisions. You're thinking about, what platform do I post on? And what am I trying to say here? And what is even the point of this? And is anyone even paying attention? I talk to women all the time who spend like 4 or 5 hours on a single reel to post on Instagram. And then it gets very few reactions in their mind, at least. It gets very few reactions. It doesn't get the kind of traction that they think that it should get. And they just feel like, what is even the point? And so you get exhausted doing this. Of course you do. You fall off the bandwagon. You fall off your consistency because this is an exhausting way to live your life and to run your business. And it's super important for me to just say, like, you're probably not running a marketing business. And even if you are running a marketing business, marketing your business is not your business, right? Marketing other people's business is your business. And so when you're spending so much time on the marketing for your business and then feeling like it's not worthwhile, or you don't know what the point is, it's this crazy warped thing where it's taking you away from doing the actual work that you are uniquely talented to do, right? You're spending time and effort and energy and frustration on your marketing, and you wind up feeling exhausted. Of course you do. Of course you wind up spiraling. Of course you wind up feeling paralyzed, because this is not sustainable. So going back to that mountain for a second, the night before when Svi asked me, what's our plan for tomorrow? I had a sense of the plan. I didn't have a very clear idea of the plan, but I had at least an idea, right? I pulled it up on my computer. I told him what I had signed us up for. It was going to be 6 kilometers of mountain biking, and I don't remember how many kilometers of hiking and how many kilometers of rock scrambling, and then Via Ferrata, right? I knew what it included. I knew the steps. But what I didn't really have was like a very clear idea of what the plan was. So the thing that sounded really great at 5:35 a.m. in our warm Airbnb, that plan that I had in my head did not hold up when it was 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. or whatever time it was. I honestly don't know how long we were out there for, but whatever time it was, that plan did not hold up against the conditions that we actually faced. And the problem is not having a bad plan. Like sometimes we just have plans that don't work out. The problem is that when we are not willing to look around at the conditions that we're in, we're not ready to check the weather and check what is actually ahead of us and change course as needed, right? We're not ready to actually look it in the eye and change course. And changing course doesn't mean all those things that you've done before, right? Changing course doesn't mean, okay, then I'll try this, and then I'll try this, and then I'll try this. No, it means actually looking at the global picture and saying, like, something is not working here. This whole plan is not working. I need to actually reevaluate what is the plan that's going to work for me. And so many business owners approach their content marketing kind of like they're in the Airbnb, right? Like they're in this warm surroundings. They're watching the people around them make certain decisions with their content marketing. They don't know all the backstory behind it, but they're seeing people succeed doing certain things. And they say like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. But then they don't actually reevaluate and see like, this is not working for me, right? And so they white knuckle and they're holding on to that frozen metal rung and they're not willing to let go. They're not willing to let go. Or on the other side of things is that the second it gets hard, they turn back, right? Those women in our group who turned back early, I'm not saying they did the wrong thing, but they were not willing to put in the effort to see like, can I get through this, right? They just turned tail and went back and said like, I'm going to try something else, right? I'm looking for another mountain. That's also not necessarily the right thing to do in business. I'm not saying, again, those women might have made the right decision for themselves, but just in business, pivoting so quickly without fully evaluating is not going to help you. And I think a lot of people bail before they've given it a chance to pay off because nobody's honest with you about how long it takes. Content marketing is a long game. It is a long game. Long game does not mean that you won't see any results for 12 months. It doesn't have to mean that at all. But it's not a very short game where like, okay, I'm going to post one reel. That reel is going to take off and suddenly my business is going to be successful. And a lot of what we're seeing in our feeds, unfortunately, sends that message. It sends this message of overnight success. But overnight success almost never actually happens, right? It happens after years and years and years of putting in effort, or months and months and months. But nobody tells you how long it's going to take to pay off and what paying off means. It doesn't necessarily mean building a huge following or having videos go viral. That's not necessarily what it means. For most people, it is not what it means. I can tell you for me, that's not what it means. I don't have a huge following. I don't have videos that have, 1 million views. That's okay. Because what I've done is I've built a very consistent message and I show up in a very consistent and human and relatable way. And so my small audience is very receptive to what I offer. And so I'm growing my business with a small audience. And I understand that this is a long game and that it takes time to nurture connections. It takes time for people to build trust. And it takes a lot of touch points. That's what it takes. And what it takes is showing up in a way that is authentic to you, that really shows who you are and the magic that you offer, and deeply connects with the people that you're trying to reach. And that's the work. And it's a lot less glamorous than the like, here are 10 tips to make you go viral. Like it is not sexy. It's not sexy. But when it's done right, it's first of all a lot more fun and a lot more effective. And it's what actually moves the needle. And look, I spent years figuring this out, both for myself and through working with clients. And I know the difference between people who are lazy and unwilling to put in the work and people who just don't have the clarity that they need. And when you have clarity about who you are and what you offer and who you're trying to talk to and what the core values are underneath what you're trying to build here, it creates connection in such a deep way. Like it is powerful like nothing else. And showing up gets so much easier. Trust me, it gets so much easier. And all of this is what I built my program, the Bold Content Collective, around. So Bold Content Collective, aka BCC, because Bold Content Collective is too long to say so many times. So BCC, if you don't know, is a small group program where we do exactly this work. We get super clear on what your brand stands for, what your brand strategy is, who you are at your core, who you're trying to reach, what is the messaging that we need to be honing in on to say the right things in the right ways on the right platforms and all the places that you need to be connecting with people. And then we build out a content plan that is actually sustainable and works for you. It's not some generic thing that can be copy pasted to anyone. This is not a template program. It is a very unique program that is all about creating together and really going through this strategic deep work together, and then actually creating content that ties back to that strategy and brings that strategy to life. And the women who've gone through BCC so far have come out the other side feeling so much clearer, so much more confident in how they're showing up. And they have a plan that they can actually maintain consistently. And it's so, so magical and powerful. The next cohort kicks off on May 14th, so it's really soon, and there are still a couple of spots left. So go check out the link in the show notes, see if this is the right program for you, and grab your spot if it feels aligned for you. If you have any questions about it, please reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation with you and see if this is the right fit for your business right now. All right, beautiful human, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. This episode was brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmukulele, production by Podium Studios, and sponsored by NitoCow. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, hit subscribe, and don't forget to rate and review us. It really helps us grow and means the world. See you next time.